And thank you for taking time out of your busy day and probably a very busy week trying to wrap everything up at your offices, before the holiday break. So I know this is always a busy time of year with both personal as well as professional things going on. We, hope that our networking call today may answer some questions for you, provide you with perhaps some new thoughts about moving forward with your work with schools. But as Susie said, we really encourage you to also unmute yourself and share your experiences and your thoughts as well. So if we could advance to a couple of slides. I want to show you briefly what we're going to try to talk about today. So we're going to share with you a little bit that the latest that we've heard from Illinois Empower. We've had the chance, the 3 ISCs, to have a meeting with Allison Sherman and her school support managers. We invited Allison to a meeting at West 40. So we have had some information that we've tried to share with you through an FAQ. We'll go over just the very top highlights of that, but then also open it up to see if you have any questions. Talk a little bit about what you told us about the trends across what's happening in the ROEs and ISCs as it relates to this work. Talk briefly about the Illinois Quality Framework and how that's going, and get your insights into the lessons that you're learning as you do this work out in the field. Share with you a little bit about some work we're doing on a work plan, but also hear from you, hopefully, with what you're doing around that work. And then also hopefully have some time to talk about other ways that you are engaging with schools. So that's our agenda for the hour. And if we could move to the next slide. So as I said, we've been fortunate to have some phone conversations and an in-person meeting with Allison Sherman, who is the executive director of the Illinois Empower statewide organization. From that, we did put together an FAQ, which I believe Mike has sent out to everyone. But I do have, if we can move one more slide, if anybody did not get that FAQ, you do have, I did give you a tiny URL to get to that. It answers a lot of the questions that we had received from either our last networking call or you had been emailing us. So is there anyone that feels as if they still have some burning questions that have not been addressed by that FAQ? Please unmute yourself or use the chat box.
Diane?
Yes?
This is Linda. Was that FAQ, I'm echoing, aren't I?
You're fine.
Okay, was the FAQ consolidated or was it just the one about finances?
No, there was a consolidated one. So this tiny URL should have the complete list of it, and it has to do with some board approval. There's some questions about finance. There were probably about 5 topic areas that this one dealt with.
Okay, so are we going to have access to this screen?
Linda, did you know? Okay, so maybe it's possible. Was this not sent out to the listserv, the FAQ? Linda, you didn't receive a copy of this FAQ,
well,
is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
I've been getting things from the listserv, so I'm not sure why I didn't get that one. When was it sent?
I think last week. But Susie, I think I just saw you bring it up. Perhaps if you could bring it up and we could just.
The last one I got was 12/7.
That was the one that just, I think, dealt with the finance questions.
That was the finance one. All right. Was it sent before that?
Yeah. Susie, can you?
Well, when I click on this, it says that I need access. So I have requested Mike to change the access on it. So let's come back to this. I'm going to let you guys talk, and I will find, I don't have it open in my account, and since I'm the one who's running the slides, I don't want you guys to watch me go through all that stuff. So
yeah, so
I'll bring it up.
Would you do me one more favor? Advance the slide, and we'll talk about the board, what needs board approval, because I think that's the next slide. Thank you.
Okay.
So this is something that I know there were a lot of questions about, and we were hearing different things across the state. These were certainly questions we were getting from you, from the field. What we heard Allison Sherman say in person at a meeting, and then also share with us in a follow-up email, a slide actually with some notes, was that this is what needs board approval. The work plan is due by February 28th and needs to be board approved. The selection of Illinois Empower Learning Partners also due at that same time and needs board approval. And this third bullet is the piece that Allison included in the notes section of a slide that she sent to us, saying that districts must have their grant application approved by their local board by February 28th. That last bullet is the one that I think has been back and forth a bit in terms of what we've heard. But that is what Allison is saying as of last week. Now, with that said, I know Allison did say that districts should go ahead and submit their grant applications so that they can get their money rolling and start to use that money, even if they don't have board approval. So they can submit their grant application and then go back and share it with their board. So that's there was one section on the FAQ about board approval. Any questions here about board approval that anybody has?
Diane, did you mention the learning partners? Do they need to be, or is that part of the application?
Well, Allison said it needs board approval, but it would be part of you would do it on the application, but you would certainly share that with your board. And it may be that the contract, that you submit with your learning partner is what board approval.
Okay, so what I have on the screen right now is the FAQ, and I just shared it with the listserv. So
perfect. There
you go.
Diane, can I ask for clarification purposes? Originally, there was a communication sent out that the rubric needed approval by the end of January. So are we saying that that is no longer the case?
The rubric needs to be completed by the end of January, but it does not need board approval. Though Allison Sherman did say that it probably is great practice for a district to be sharing the results of the rubric with their board, but it does not need board approval. And that is due by January 31st.
Okay, so just submission through the platform, but no approval.
Right.
Do you remember, is there a place on the 1003A application where they have to enter a date for the
rubric? Only for the work plan.
Just for the work plan. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we did share with you the FAQ. If you looked it over and have any other questions, certainly jump in at any point in time. So this is the other thing that we have been doing recently is we did have a go-to meeting with the Illinois Empower School support managers. In the FAQ, I believe we've got their names listed out for you. I think it is in there. They talked about primarily that they're working with the lowest performing schools, which was nothing new there. They're doing exactly kind of what we're doing, providing support, helping them think through the IQF, how to get that completed, starting to think through the work plan. And then this last bullet that they did share is as they start to understand a school's needs, either through the IQF or through looking at their data with them, they're helping schools to consider who might be an appropriate learning partner for them to engage with. So in essence, they're helping them to make that decision. And I certainly got the sense from them that if they felt as if an ROE or an ISC could be helpful in that process, that they were, promoting our support with schools. We also talked to them a little bit. On the next slide, you'll see that we talked to them about, partnering, the ROEs and ISCs partnering with the Illinois Empower School Support Managers to help our schools, and they certainly readily bought onto that concept. In terms of how to do that, we talked about, we knew that there were some networking meetings that some ROE offices were hosting and inviting their designated schools to. They said that they would be happy if they were invited to those meetings to also come and be a part of those meetings, and I think that is happening in some places across the state. They can certainly, help you answer perhaps some questions that your school districts might have. But we definitely got the sense that for the underperforming schools, they're not going to be able to go out and work directly with those schools. And that's where they see our role of helping our schools that are designated as underperforming. We put the school support manager phone on here. So if you want to give them a call, or you can certainly use that number. But if you have not engaged, at least with a introductory sort of call or email to your school support manager for your area, that might be something you want to consider. I'm going to stop and see. I know last time that we had our networking meeting, a couple of our ROEs had talked about ways that they had been engaging with their school support managers. Anybody want to add to that conversation today?
And I'm sorry, I have a question. You say that the school support managers are only working with lowest. They're also assisting underperforming, correct? Or am I wrong?
Well, probably not on a, where they can go out and spend a great deal of time with underperforming schools. Their main focus is the lowest performing. They're willing to support.
This is Susie. I will tell you that I know of one school support manager who has met with, went to a regional office and met with the superintendent in that region, and talked to people who were lowest and ranked as that. But I don't know that that's been universal. I don't think it's happened up in our area or our region. Okay, thank you.
Down here in the south suburbs, this is John Randich from ROE 56 and 24. We have about 20 schools in our 3-county area that are underperforming, and we have one-on-one support from our office here at the PDA to the schools. But the second thing we've done is created 4 ESSA support group sessions. And on February 27th from 7:30 to 9:30, Merle Siefken, who's the school support manager for the south suburbs, will be here at the ROE in Joliet. We have morning breakfast meetings, and we invite all schools to this session. So he's agreed to be a resource for us. He'll kind of talk about the latest updates from ISBE, his role in Illinois Empower, and sort of share his experience in supporting our schools. So at these ESSA support meetings, we do get all schools, not all schools, but we do get some schools who are not underperforming, but want to kind of get ahead of the curve for next year.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, thank you, John. So just to clarify, you are inviting all of your schools, but it's mostly underperforming and lowest performing that are attending these meetings?
It's a mix of both. We only have 20 schools in our area, our 3-county area, so it's been a mix, but we've opened it up to all of them. It's been about 50-50.
Okay, great. And that is definitely the sense of what I picked up from the school support managers, that if you have those types of meetings, certainly to try to invite them to them, and if they can fit it in their schedules, that they would try. So the other thing that we, wanted to just kind of share with you is just to, for you to kind of see where your colleagues, the other ROEs and ISCs are in terms of their work. So in our survey that we put out to you prior to this call, we asked what type of work that you've been engaged with in the last month. These were the top 3 that came across in the survey data. I think all of the ROE offices and ISC's offices are reaching out to their designated schools, trying to answer questions, trying to engage them in terms of using the ROE or ISC for support, starting to provide some support with the IQF, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, and then also people mention that they're scheduling TSIP trainings. I don't know if there's any TSIP official trainings that have happened yet. If anybody has conducted those and have really gotten into the meat of the TSIP, plan with a school or a district, we'd be happy to hear about it now. Anybody want to share anything?
I guess we can take the fact that nobody is unmuted to talk about this, that no one has conducted or started an actual TSIP training. Is that accurate? If you have, please interrupt and tell me I'm wrong.
I've done some. This is Angie.
Who is this?
This is Angie.
Hi, Angie.
Garza. Hi.
Can you tell us about them?
Well, we've got our 4-part series that we're doing throughout the year with coaching visits in between to work with the teams. And so we, of course, started the year working through the IQF. And so at our second session that we had just a few weeks ago, we finished up work on the framework rubric, and then we transitioned into data. And so we were really focusing on the work of Victoria Barnhart, and looking at those 4 buckets of data in order to develop a problem statement and then to dig into the root cause analysis. So at our next session, we'll be continuing that conversation, and then we're going to start identifying potential solutions, to evidence-based solutions, so that they can not only start thinking about what that action plan might look like on the TSIP plan, but then also be able to complete the rest of their work plan in a very general kind of sense. So
Angie, this is great. Can you share with me a little bit okay, so you have these scheduled for the whole year. Is this
yes.
by individual school, or are they groups of school teams coming together? Tell me what this looks like and how often you're meeting.
So we're meeting quarterly. We've left ourselves open to, so for example, our next scheduled date is February 12th. However, several of the schools were concerned that they were going to be able to get all of this accomplished and into their boards for board approval by the end of February. So we scheduled another training, which is kind of going to be a duplication in January, on January 15th. It's schools, we actually have a mix of schools. So we have our targeted populations who are attending, and they're bringing teams. And then we also have a school that is not in status who was initially designated and decided to continue on with the process and is going to ultimately have the rest of their district do this next year. So we have well over, I would say 35, 36 people who attend regularly. And so it's just a nice mix of teams. We spend a lot of time allowing the groups to talk and interact and get feedback on where they're at in the process, share experiences and formats. So lots of good networking and sharing is part of that, but then we also dig into the core of the learning and give them some time with their teams to kind of get a good start, and then we assign homework at the end. And so the homework they do with their coaches, and then when they come back, they have to have that homework done so that we can get into the next conversation.
And I just like to follow up. Thank you, Angie, for sharing. And I'd like to follow up on this piece about the coaching piece. So in between your meetings, you're sending somebody out from the ROE as a coach to help them with their homework?
Yes. So I've had about 4 or 5 meetings with one district and another 4 or 5 that are on the books for another. We've got several coaches working out of our office, and we've divided up the schools who are participating, and they're providing support at either release days where they get subs and have release time for their teams, or sometimes it's after school SIP days. But their role is to help support, clarify, question, really kind of help those schools work through the conversation and the process. And it's been greatly appreciated by the folks that we're working with.
Yeah, what a nice
Andy, can I
design
follow
to
up?
be, to have both the meetings as well as the coaching support in between. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to know, how are you charging for this? Are you charging for, you know, the experience of a year-long thing by school? Are you charging by attendance per person? Do you charge extra for the coaching? Can you help us understand, like,
Sure.
how the fee structure works for it?
We have a school improvement cooperative. So this year, all of the schools in our districts in our area paid 12% of their Title II allocation. So all of the sessions are supported by the school improvement co-op. If you're not a member of the co-op, and we have a few districts who are not, they're not any of our participating districts. But if we were to have folks who would attend who are not co-op members, then it would be $100 per person per session. And then the coaching right now we've left open as part of a co-op service, but most of the schools and districts that we're working with as part of this process, we've already had initial conversations with them that we would like to offset the cost of some of that through acting as an Empower partner, but we don't necessarily have all the logistics of that figured out yet. So right now we're just covering all of that under the School Improvement Cooperative.
Good, thank you. Because I saw that somebody asked about TDA charging for, if they're charging for those morning meetings, and they said yes, they're charging $35, which includes breakfast. And then in ROE 39, they said they're not charging. Nancy, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. We are going to be hosting just informational network meetings on Thursday mornings until the work plans are developed and all of those kinds of things. Then we will start charging when we're working individually. But right now we're just bringing in the people who are affected, who are in the lowest performing groups. And we're giving them our Illinois Empower person is meeting with them in our regional office. And then they're just having time to network and to share ideas with what they're looking at. They're looking at their data and then just kind of brainstorming. So we're doing that 2 Thursdays in January. And like I said, we're not charging for that yet. But once the contracts are signed and all of that kind of thing, then we will be charging.
Okay. And then either Mary or John from TDA, can you tell us a little bit about how the $35 charge is working out? Are people not having a problem with it? What kind of attendance, or how many people are registered for this upcoming event? Mary or John, you guys, can you, and if you're talking, you're still muted.
Hi, Susie. It's Hallie. I'm not sure. I'm off site.
Hi, Hallie.
I'm not sure. Hi. So I think I'm off site, so I can't check. We only have about 8 registered now. We'll blast it out again soon. We'll probably get about 10 to 12. We don't always get a whole lot of them. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
Oh, it was just how many people are registered and what's the response to charging for this?
There doesn't seem to be,
I guess
you know,
that's
like
the
any
same
concern with the
question.
charge. Yep. No concern really with the charge, I think. And I hope that we get more because we have Merle coming out to this one. So I think when we blast it out a second time, this should be like one of our bigger ones. So.
Okay. Does anybody else who's on here have any questions? We're trying to monitor the chat box. Angie also put that she forgot to mention that there are full day sessions. They do provide lunch and access to a shared Google folder with all materials in each session. So feel free, everybody who's on here, we're giving you the permission or the, empowering you to unmute and ask any questions. So those are just questions that Diane and I have, but feel free if you have questions to unmute yourself and ask along the way. That's the whole point of doing the networking, is to get your questions answered and provide you with the latest information. So
Susie, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Shay. Is there any district that currently has a written contract with a school who has been identified as a learning partner, has started charging as a learning partner?
We do. I saw your email. West 40. We have a contract, and I will share that with you. I just haven't gotten to it yet. So we have a contract with a school district as a learning partner, and have set it up for, I don't remember if it's 3 payments or quarterly payments, but I can share that with you. And then it really is for the work we ended up embedding into, because the way it's written is that between October and May, we would be coming out 5 times a month. And what we found is in September, we didn't have quite 5 times. October, we had 12. So we're just kind of keeping an eye on it. And what they have contracted our services for is really working on culture and climate within the entire district and coaching their principals. So because we were light in, I said September, we were light in one of the months, we included the Illinois Quality Framework training in our sessions, but now some opportunities are coming up as we're working through the needs assessment where they are asking for some additional professional learning opportunities or PD, and those will be a separate contract. So I will share with you what our contract looks like today.
Okay,
And
that's
Susie,
fine.
This is Mike. Just one quick note about that. Susie mentioned we're working with all their schools. That's because all of their schools are underperforming. Just in case you were wondering about that.
Okay, Mike.
Okay, and I'll reach out to Angie a different time. I'm in a similar situation of Angie that we have co-op time. So it's been interesting trying to manage the same school that's underperforming. How do I manage co-op time and what do I call ESSA money, and manage those and keep those, because it's similar things going on for both technically.
Right. And so what my unsolicited advice is you're probably just going to need to figure out what the dollar amount would be. And I don't know how your co-ops pay in to that, but then, just working out with the school, what's above and beyond this co-op piece. Because if your schools are anything like our school that we already have a contract with, they also got other evidence-based funding money put in there. And so some of your schools may have even more than the original designation or summative designation money. So
yeah, they received a good amount more in some of these cases, yes.
Right. And so then as ROEs all across the state, we're all in the same boat. Like we're all uncomfortable or a little bit leery of talking about money and charging. And you don't want to change your prices. So be firm in your mind about what you think is a fair amount, and then just keep going with it. It's still going to be way less than any of the other approved providers that are out there.
So I was questioned about that. I was actually brought into the district office of a particular, one of the schools that had already agreed to be a learning partner with us, but I was brought in by the superintendent and asked to pretty much give a presentation of pretty much selling us because he wanted to meet with every learning partner out there. to find out. And they kept saying how we
sorry.
are the most expensive. We are the most expensive.
And how did you counter that?
Well, I also went back and did some more research of myself and looking at those hours that you had pointed out the last time. You know, look at the number of hours that they're requesting. They make sure that, you know, some of them, it has to be a 6-hour day. You have to pay for all this stuff, and the fact that we're closer, nearby. And I did negotiate a little bit down from what we had on the contract, just because they would be using me more often. I was trying to build that rapport.
Right, and that's the thing. If you go on, or if people are price comparison shopping and they're looking at these contracts that are on ISCE's website, and ours is on there too, it would appear at first glance that we are either equal or more expensive. But when you look at the number of hours, CEC, AIR, these other for-profit organizations have a ton more hours of what it would cost to do some of the work here. So, and they're charging for each piece of it. And what we have seen is that the proposals that are coming from some of our competitors come pretty close to using up all of the money that the schools were allotted. And with our one, contract that we have, we're at half of what they're, just with what we've signed on to in our contract. So they have the other half of the money to spend on professional learning with us, with anyone, and other things as they come along with their evidence-based funding. So I feel like we're being pretty fair in the cost thing.
And the other thing I kept mentioning was everything that's on those pieces of paper are guesstimates. Nobody's gone through this yet. So the fact that we put down 12 hours or 15 hours, those are just guesses of how long it will take until we actually get into the work. Right.
And you all have the autonomy and the ability to charge less. We just can't go over that $300 an hour. So a lot of people are putting them in packages and doing project fees and things like that, so that they can see, well, if we were charging you the full amount, it would be this, but because you're going to do so much ongoing work with us, you get a price break. So it's just a little twitchy in this transition year of going from free to charging, unless you have co-op situations and places that are used to paying in for your services. So are there other questions that anyone has?
Susie, this is Lori Loving.
Hi, Lori.
Hi. I just wanted to check in that so the IARSS Illinois Empower Committee sent out a sample service agreement for everyone. If you want to use that as you enter into agreements with the schools, you don't have to. If your office or if the school has a different agreement you want to use, that's fine. But I just want to make sure that everybody was aware that that's available. And then we're also trying to collect some just preliminary simple data so that we're at least aware as an association of which schools we're working with or how many schools we're working with, and just a general idea of what the services are being provided. And so that link has gone out as well. It's just a Google survey with about 5 questions on it, because the association will have to do eventually reports to ISB as an Illinois Empower provider on, minimum who we're working with. So I just want to make sure everybody was aware of both of those tools.
Lori, could you do me a favor? Thank you for those reminders. You're right. So just remember what Illinois Empower and Allison Sherman are telling everyone is the contract can come from the school. If the school says it should come from the office, IARSS has created a tool that you could use or modify that you and that the school make that agreement on. Our agreement came before the IARSS was done, and so it just looked like other contracts that we had used in the past in this office. So, and Lori, the favor I'm asking you to do is, will you resend out the sample contract and the data link to TSIP west40.org, and that would be everybody on our listserv. That would just, I don't think it would hurt so people aren't having to dig through emails or look through their shared with me folders, since we're talking about it right now. Could you do that for us?
You sure can. Yep, no problem.
Thanks.
Lori,
Thank
this
you.
is Diane. I've got a follow-up question for you regarding the survey that IRS is looking for. So I know some people have been talking about, well, we're doing, some networking meetings. We're doing this, we're doing that. Is IRSS looking just for when you engage in a formal contract with a school or district regarding anything related to ESSA? Or are they really looking to gather just a lot of data of how the ROEs and ISCs are meeting the needs of school?
I think that's a good question, Diane. I think the form that we have created is more if you enter into a service agreement with a specific school as an Illinois Empower partner. I think that we probably should also consider how do we track the data of what we're doing, with whole groups or small groups in terms of training and networking and cohorts and such. So I think that's something that we probably should consider. Allison Sherman shared with us, and Ralph Grimm said that they would not collect any data from us this year since it's a planning year, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be proactive and at least being able to tell our story of what sort of services we did provide. So I think for right now, we don't have that in place, but I think it's something that we should consider.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
so looking at the the survey, it asked specific questions about date service agreement was enacted, how much budget, how much you pretty much charging. So I'm looking to fill this out, but I can't fill it out yet until I actually get the agreement in my hand.
Right, I think that's going to be ongoing, that whenever you engage in an agreement, you should fill one of those out and get that Google form sent in. So these were a couple of other barriers, challenges that people had indicated on the survey, and we're going to try to address this. But the idea of how do we really get schools to commit to working with us in order to support them. And then also having access to some of the information that the school has in Iowa's or SIS. So we will try to, at the end of the call, try to definitely address these two barriers. But if there's anything else that somebody has seen as a barrier or a challenge that they would like to bring up now before we move on. Okay, so I know that, quite a few people have indicated that they are out in schools and districts or having meetings at their offices, helping schools to complete the IQF, which is due by January 31st. What are the ways that you're structuring this work, and what lessons have you learned in, the work that you've done so far? We'll open it up for people to either write in the chat box or open up your mic to talk.
So I worked with 2 schools on the IQF, same district, 2 different schools, and we structured a meeting. We had pretty much a one-day meeting where they brought their SIP team or whoever they can get subs for, in some cases, their SIP team into each one of those, and we spent the day going through the rubric, identifying what evidence we would use to support that score, and they were then going to get the information to the person who was uploading everything. We actually both of them finished in a day. It's now just a matter of getting the information in and putting it into Iowa's.
Thanks, Shay, for sharing. Anybody else?
Deb and ROE 49 and we had a similar workshop and went over the rubric thoroughly and developed evidence, artifacts, and lists of different things.
Nancy, I know you're talking, but it's difficult to hear you. Are you on a phone or a computer, Mike?
No, on the computer. Can you hear me now?
Yep, much better, thank you.
Okay.
Can you
Okay.
re-share?
Yes, Deb and I in ROE 49 in Rock Island had a full day where most of the afternoon was spent. It was an overview in the morning of all the different pieces, and then the afternoon participants, we had about 6 underperforming schools and became familiar with the rubric, and then we took apart the standards. We collected lists of evidence that might support or artifacts might be looking at, and then we sent them on their way to do their homework.
Thank you, Nancy.
Uh-huh.
And Susie, if you could advance the slides, please. So this is Diane, and I've been out in 2 districts that have multiple schools that are underperforming. Spent a whole day in each district doing what I call a deep dive into the IQF, really looking at the purpose setting questions, unpacking each indicator. We did a activity in which they had to, before they even saw the rubric, they were considering what they considered exemplary to look like and determining what their evidence would be, you know, if they had connected to that. So really a full day doing, you know, a very deep dive into the framework, and then showing them the rubric, and then they really started to dig into it. And what the piece that I think, you know, I heard back from both districts was that they really understood the framework, understood what they were looking for, and were able to contextualize it for their district before they even started to think about what the rubric looked like. And I know Susie has said that as she's and other people in West 40 have been working in districts, that this last bullet here about helping schools to really determine evidence connected to indicators before they determine their rating. So it's really, you know, really thinking about what does evidence look like related to this indicator before I start to think about at what level would I rate myself. Any other words of wisdom or lessons learned from completing the IQF out in districts?
I think having a common understanding and language when it comes to some of those descriptors in the rubric. You know, we've had a lot of conversation about what does it mean to be, you know, consistent, or what does some or many or almost always look like. The other thing that I've learned is that if you leave schools to their own devices without support, they tend to, this is going to sound really bad, they tend to think they're doing better than maybe what they actually are. So we talked about job embedded professional learning. We've talked about quite a few pieces where there just wasn't that understanding, and we had spent time unpacking all of the standards and the rubric, but there was still that kind of misunderstanding of what that really meant. And so it's caused schools to go back and rethink once they had a common language and a better understanding. So that's what a lot of our time as we're coaching them through that process, I think, is looking like.
Mm-hmm. And I see in the chat box that Linda Oshita has said that they've been hosting afternoon sessions, and that some of the rubric vocabulary and really getting a common definition about what the distinctions are between almost and consistently is something that schools need to think through, perhaps have some support, some guidance to really, you know, come to common, you know, decisions about. She also says that, you know, she's finding that schools often choose to kind of rate themselves at the lower level, thinking that, you know, well, am I really there? And this gives me room to grow. So, and I found that too, that I think there were certainly schools that were, that idea of always is a hard word for them to say, yeah, we always do that. So sometimes they were rating themselves in that third category. I do want to share with you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, this, I don't want to beat a dead horse related to this, but Mike and I have really learned with all of the framework work that we've done and the needs assessment, we spent so much time on the framework itself and like we were supposed to, right? And have been frustrated at the number of schools who do exactly that, who they go, even though they've got standards groups, they have all the pieces set in place, their tendency to go straight to the ranking without looking at the evidence. And so I changed it up. I had the opportunity to work with a couple of schools on Friday, and they only gave me an hour and a half to do this first day of the Illinois Quality Framework and Supporting Rubric. And so I really had to decide where I was going to focus my time. And I spent the bulk of it on looking at exemplary and how it compares to, you know, the other pieces of the rating, and then stressing the evidence and really talking about, you know, nobody at the State Board of Education is looking for you to be ranking yourselves as exemplary or even accomplished in all of these things. It seems a little funny that you would be, you know, exemplary, yet somehow on one of these lists. So to really encourage them to do an honest assessment, otherwise it's no different than any other school improvement effort that they've done. The goal is not to get through it and say, yay, look at us. The goal is to look at it and say, all right, where do we need to focus? What will we get the most bang for our buck if we put our focus in these 2 or 3 areas? So having those very explicit conversations about, you know, we're not trying to get as far over to the right in the rubric as we do this needs assessment. This is just to tell us where the work needs to lay. So, sorry.
Well, thank you, Susie. And I think that's the other piece that I've found as I've done, you know, work with schools around this is to then, you know, have them really think about what are the 1 or 2 areas on these indicators that they want to focus on. That, yeah, they may have some scores all over the board, but to make a list of 10 areas to be focusing on, they're not going to do any of those 10 areas well, or it'd be hard to do all 10 of those areas. So what are the 1 or 2 leverage points that they could really say, this needs assessment helps us to narrow our focus and think about what we need to do. What you see on the screen now is a document that an assistant superintendent in one of my districts created and shared with me and said I could share with anybody. It basically is the rubric, but just in a little bit shorter capsized sort of formatting. And this is a document that you could use as a working document as you're working with in your school to be rating yourselves on the rubric. But if you see at the bottom where it says notes and evidence artifacts, when we use this in one of the schools I did some training in last week, we were encouraging them to just actually list the evidence that they're using for this indicator, or actually, you know, link the evidence. So make a copy of it and link the evidence. That this could be, you could, you know, highlight a box in terms of standard 1, you know, element 1, I'm at accomplished, and you could highlight that box and use it as your rating. The next one, element 2, I really feel as if we're exemplary. So this could be your working document, and now here's your list of all the evidence that we use to get to those ratings, and you save this, and whoever is going to input the final information into Iowa's just really pulls it and takes it right from here, from this one working you know, template. So if anybody wants to use it, feel free to. Assistant Superintendent in District 21, Wheeling District 21, has given permission for anyone to use this.
Okay, so we have about 11 minutes left, and we have about 3 chunks of work that we still want to make sure that we at least touch on. And I want to start with the work plan for improvement. We've had a lot of really great conversations, and I'm so thankful for that. What I want to be able to do is show you a tool that we have been using for the work plan. I'm going to ask you what you guys are doing. If you're not doing the work plan yet, or if you're not approaching that work, just put something in the chat box so that we're not just waiting for you to share. But I would like to know what you guys are doing. Like to share the tool that we're also going to share electronically with you and make it so that you guys can give feedback. Like to tell you a little, like to have a conversation about where you're finding your entry points in working with schools. And then a piece I want to make sure that we get to, but it's at the very end, is showing you some useful reports that Vanessa and Diane and their groups have been using with schools as an entry point. So I just kind of wanted to give a quick heads up. We got 10 minutes left, and that's where I'd like to go. But starting, if you would unmute yourself, is anybody starting doing the work on the work plan, or at least prepping and planning that work? All right, I'm not giving a total ton of wait time because I want to keep going. So I'm going to assume that either people are just starting to think about it, or maybe you're not someplace yet. So the next thing I want to do is I want to show you a tool that Mike has created that we're planning on using with our schools. It's, you know, as it says at the top, that this isn't intended to serve as a school improvement plan, but it really does take each one of those 4 questions and give the participants or the people with whom you're working a chance to kind of thoughtfully go through those questions and have a way to show that. So this is going to look a little weird as I leave the PowerPoint, but let me show you. This is what it actually looks like. I'm not going to take a ton of time, but I want to show you that it has the work plan for question 1, and then it has a chart where you could embed information. If you want to use that table, you would capture the current status of your school against what ISBE proficiency targets are. And I'm just going to show you real quick where we're getting that comes from the ISBE webinars. It's been in a lot of different ones, but the most recent one, and the link to that webinar is in the notes too, of where these proficiency targets are for K-8, ELA, and math, and then high school for both of them. But that's embedded in the document. Like I said, we're going to share this with you all, and we want you to give feedback, because even our team, when Mike first shared it with our team, we were using a different data point and decided to go with the proficiency target. So I'm going to just fly through that a little bit, unless you guys have some specific questions about this. But as you can see in the notes right here, we have a link to the document so that you can look at it, and we're going to want you guys to ask questions or put comments in there. Is there anybody, though, right now that has any questions that they want to share related to this?
So Susie, this is Dardella. Would this be the document that they would upload to iWAS?
They could. I need help here. Vanessa, Diane, somebody else help me out with this one.
Yeah, so this definitely, the work plan does have the 4 questions in there. What it does is it provides some structure. Those questions are pretty just open-ended, you know, for a narrative type of thing. This provides some structure for each of the 4 questions.
So Ardella, this is Mike. Yes, you can use this if you want. There is no mandated template from ISB.
Okay.
So schools can use whatever they would like.
Yeah, and this will make it a lot easier for them to, as they're looking for the questions and trying to get the answers in. So thanks.
So we're really counting on you guys to look through this and think about how you might present this or use this as a tool with your district, and give us feedback, because it was our conversation with our team of ISCs up here that you know, we've already made some changes to it. So we're hoping this can be collaborative, and that, you know, give us feedback. What do you like? What do you not like? What would you change? Okay, so next piece, just real quick, entry point for ROEs to work with schools. I know it's been tough. Some people don't seem to have the same sense of urgency that we at the office level have. So I'm just going to tell you real quick, we had an Illinois Empower networking meeting in which we invited Allison. We invited school support managers, and Allison said that she wanted to come and do it. So we opened it up to all 3 ISCs, and she gave a little 45-minute presentation, answered questions with them, and then we had a networking piece where they got to connect with each other. This was not something that we charged for. It was a 2-hour event, and then you'll see when you see the slides. I've put in here. You could watch what we did. We have it recorded, and this is everything that we shared with the schools. So, you know, the FAQ again is in here, the timeline, the summative designation webinar, our learning partner video. Again, if you haven't sent that out to your schools as a way to say, hey, you know, we're here, we can help with you with some of these things. And then the template, or not the template, the tool that we're thinking about using for the work plan. This was designed to just ask, you know, what kind of pain you might be feeling, or what are the districts feeling from their perspective? Is there anything that you guys are noticing that people are struggling with? Or is it just our pain about a lack of urgency?
Well, we're working along with our schools, but I'm confused about the timeline that Mike sent from Allison, and how it shows that the Illinois Quality Framework and Supporting Rubric has a January 31st approval date from the LEA and the SEA. Is that not the board?
Well,
now
Allison,
we don't need board approval for the QRF.
No, those 3 things that we had on an earlier slide, Linda, are the pieces that in Allison's slide that she sent out that we forwarded to the TSIP with the updated notes. Those are the 3 things that need board approval.
Okay.
So these things: the work plan, the selection of learning partners, and their grant application. Those are the 3 things that need approval. And when you're talking about that January 31st deadline, Allison has... I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Linda.
Okay.
What was your question? Everybody? Linda, what was your question?
She might have dropped off.
Okay. All right. So another thing, let me go straight into the Vanessa and Diane piece, is that they're offering to look at data with their schools. I'm going to let them take over and talk about this. Vanessa, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Thanks, Susie.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the things that we're finding some success with our schools is when we know some of their data ahead of time, before we even talk with them or meet with them, what we've been doing is asking them to send us the reports that are on the screen, the first 3 for elementary, or the second 3 for high school students, or for high schools. And I know this, I'm sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. I know this sounds really strange, but what we've been doing is taking their reports, asking them to send them to us. And then, Susie, if you would go to the next page, or the next slide. On this slide, this one is, I guess the question is, once we look at all of just these 3 reports that the state gives them, the last column, if you look at that last column, and everybody probably knows this column, the state intentionally did not total that. When we total it, the first one, this school, this is a live example. This school, their IEP students, you can see they're at 28.32. So they didn't make that 36.9, that the overall score that they needed to make. And this is one of our schools that kind of said to us, oh, you know what, it's just our IEP kids. And so we asked them, can we have your data? When they sent it, you can see they have two other subgroups, or I'm sorry, two other student groups that are just hanging on by a thread. So what we've been kind of trying to do is say, send us your reports, let us take a little cursory look. And then we can say, yes, your IEP students are the student group that put you where you are today. However, look how close your other subgroups are, or your, sorry, student groups. Look at how close your other student groups are. And what we're finding is that schools have no idea that they have to even add these. They have no idea, and not all, of course, but they don't know, let's add this up. How do we even do this? What does this mean? And so we're really thinking that an entry point has got to be looking at their actual park data. So this is kind of just where we've started, and then we can tell them, all right, we notice looking at your initial data here that you have, yes, the student group of IEP, but you also have the other student groups. And what we have found, and you guys tell me, we're open to hearing ideas, what we have found is once we kind of show that we have some expertise in this area, they're much more willing to listen and open up and say, okay, what does this mean? So then the next step we're thinking is when we bring them together, we brought them together for the framework. At the point we had them at the framework, we asked them to send us these reports. We're hoping to do a work plan session, and at that point say bring these reports so we can start to teach them. But looking at the actual park data, how helpful, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, how helpful it really is, but we don't have access to these reports. So one of my questions to you guys are your district, or will your schools share this information with you? We're asking, we've gotten probably 35 schools so far that have actually sent it, but these reports are so important to them and really helpful. So again, we're just finding it's a nice entry point for the schools to get in to talk to them at all.
And I see that Dara has asked, where does the school get the school index report? This is all in each school's state reporting in SIS, in Iowa's. So we can't get into a school's reports. They have to open them up, and then they can share them with us as a PDF, and then we can, you know, work through with them. And North Cook has had some similar success to South Cook in terms of spending time in schools really looking at these reports and helping them to think about what are their student groups they need to be focusing on, but also perhaps what area is it, you know, are they really far from the mark in terms of proficiency? Where are their growth? Where's their growth? Where's their E2P? In one district I was working in, they were kind of shocked to see that chronic absenteeism was a bigger issue than they would have ever thought. And it was only by really looking at these reports that you can start to see that.
Right. And again, I think the struggle that we're having is schools saying, okay, I'm off the list, or I only have one group left on the list. Why do I need to go through this whole TSIP process? So we're thinking that either part of the TSIP needs to become this data section. And again, we're just hoping get our foot in the door, and with everywhere we go, everyone we talk to, we say, you know what, have you taken a look at that? Does your staff understand how to interpret and read those? And that really seems to be, like Diane said, kind of opening their eyes a little bit to say, wait, what do you mean we can check how close we are? And so some of our schools don't even know that they have access to all this information.
So, Vanessa, Dara asked, this report that I have the screenshot of on the screen right now, this is in SIS, right? Not IWS?
It's in SIS, yes. It's the district level. So we had our last framework day last week, and so we had all the principals in the room, and we didn't have their district folks, and we said, all right, can you call up this report? Most of them don't have access to the report, so they need to get it probably from the superintendent level. So that's where I've emailed the superintendents and said, hey, can you send us your schools these 3 reports, the raw, the indicator, and the index report. They come into PDF, and we learned yesterday we can actually put that into an Excel sheet so that it will total it for us instead of us having to do all the work of totaling it.
And then I haven't told you guys this yet, and Mike asked me to make sure that I let you know that he's making a set of slides for our group on for all of you on how to find student growth percentile. So when you're going in, because this is something I was not familiar with, and I got to be honest, I don't know how many of you on the call are intimidated by some of this. I'm very intimidated. So I'm just saying, if you're feeling intimidated by this piece of it, you're not alone. That I'm lucky to work with these smart people up here who know what they're doing and are going to show me how to do it.
And you know, there's one other report that the schools get, and it's their assessment score, and it actually gives, and you guys probably all know this, by each of their students, it gives them their growth percentile per student. So again, our thinking is that's really going deep into the data, not just the 3 reports that you have on the screen are just kind of a cursory look, but then they have to be able to look at all those other pieces, such as student growth. And the district I was with the other day, their student growth, or their student group was IEP kids, but all of their groups, they're above the mark. However, they made very little growth from last year to this year, and they were very deflated, but it was also an entry point to say, okay, how far do you want to go into the data? We can come and help you, and then help you develop your TSIP or your plan to address those groups. So we found it an entry point, but it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, so we're clearly over our time, and I apologize for that. But that's the bulk of the information. I know I flew through the work plan stuff. I wanted to make sure that you heard Vanessa and Diane talking about this piece, because I think this piece is pivotal. There were a couple questions in the chat box about that work plan tool that will be sent out to you along with this PowerPoint. Any other questions right now before I end the recording?
Susie, I see a question from John asking if Allison shared any dates for school designations in 2019. Would it be July or October?
My understanding, and anybody jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, is that that's going to be done July every year. That October was just so that they could figure out how it looked different than what the old data that they were using, and to put that growth percentage. Does anybody have different information than that? Okay, anything else? I apologize for going over. Hopefully you found this worthwhile. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to anybody on the team. Mike, Vanessa, Diane are probably the go-to people from our 3 offices. Or if you want to reach out individually based on anything that you heard said, we usually try to include each other in our responses. But please, folks, use the TSIP at west40.org. That's our listserv, and those questions will go out to everyone. The networking piece of being a trainer with this, it really helps if we ask questions and offer them out to the entire group. So if you don't feel like you have something after we send out an email with the PowerPoint and the work plan, and then after the call is processed, of course, that will be available too. Just let us know. But other than that, thank you very much. If I don't talk to you, have a wonderful and restful break, and enjoy your day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday.
You too. Bye, Susie.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks.